Welcome back to the channel. Today, we bring you a story that will leave you questioning appearances and secrets. She returned to the village in a Benz, a sight nobody could have predicted. The same dusty streets that once whispered her name with mockery now watched in stunned silence as she rolled in, polished and proud, the engine purring like a lion. The villagers, still stuck in their old judgments, couldn't hide their surprise. Some shook their heads, muttering under their breath, "Is that really her?" Others whispered about the Benz, the driver, the sudden wealth. Her return was more than a surprise, it was a ripple through the calm waters of gossip and envy. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the uneven stones of the compound. The sun caught on her perfectly styled hair, the designer bag slung over her shoulder, and the sleek lines of her car. Memories of her struggles in the village, the teasing, the poverty, the doors that always seemed closed, flashed in her mind. But she didn't flinch, she held her head high, letting the eyes of the villagers follow her every move. Everyone thought they knew her story. They remembered the girl who left with nothing, the one who seemed to disappear into the city. But no one could have guessed the truth she carried, the secret that had transformed her life. The truth that even those closest to her might never have imagined. As she walked past the familiar faces, some smiled politely, some faked recognition, and some looked away, ashamed of how quickly they had judged. Her mother, standing near the gate, couldn't hide the mix of pride and worry on her face. She knew what this return meant, not just the Benz or the wealth, but the choices and battles that had shaped her daughter into someone almost unrecognizable. The village would soon learn that beneath the luxury and confidence, something deeper had shifted. Something that would change the way everyone saw her, and perhaps, change the way they saw themselves too. The whispers grew louder as she walked past the old compound gates. Children stopped playing, staring at the shiny car and the woman who had once been just another girl from the village. Some of the elders shook their heads, muttering about luck, fortune, or perhaps the city's magic. Yet, no one dared ask the question on everyone's mind: how did she get this far so fast? She paused near the well, the very spot where she had spent endless afternoons fetching water, dreaming of a life bigger than these dusty streets. Memories tugged at her heart, a mix of nostalgia and bitterness. She remembered the people who had laughed at her, the neighbors who mocked her, even the boys she once liked who had turned away when she had nothing to offer. She had left quietly, carrying only her dreams and determination, and now she was back, holding answers no one could imagine. Her eyes scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces, a neighbor with a forced smile, a former classmate whose arrogance hadn't aged well, and the village chief who still carried the weight of authority. Everyone expected her to flaunt her success, to gloat, to remind them of their past judgments. But she didn't. She kept walking, a calm confidence in every step, letting the silence speak louder than words. And yet, behind that composed exterior, a secret pulsed, a truth that could change everything. Her wealth was not just from city jobs or a successful business. There was someone, or something, connected to her sudden fortune that the village could never anticipate. It was dangerous, it was hidden, and it was about to reveal itself in ways that would shock even the closest to her. By the time she reached her mother, who had been waiting near the compound gate, there was a pause, a quiet acknowledgement. The mother's eyes glimmered with pride but also concern, sensing the weight of what her daughter carried. There were questions that needed answers, but the answers were not ready yet. The village watched, waiting, oblivious to the storm gathering behind the calm surface. Every whispered comment, every turned head, every small gasp of surprise added fuel to the tension. And as the sun began to dip behind the distant trees, the village was about to learn that some returns are more than just about money, cars, or appearances. They are about secrets, choices, and consequences that can change everything. The village had never felt so quiet. Even the usual chatter seemed to pause, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. She reached the center of the compound, where a few curious neighbors had gathered, peeking from behind gates and windows. Every eye followed her, trying to piece together the mystery of her return. No one dared speak first. The Benz gleamed under the afternoon sun, its polished surface reflecting the anxious faces around it. Children whispered to one another, some daring to step closer, fascinated by the contrast between the girl they remembered and the woman standing before them. She smiled faintly, a calm, almost knowing smile, as if she could read their thoughts. Then, he appeared. The man everyone thought was just a quiet, ordinary figure in the village. The one who had always stayed in the shadows, unnoticed and underestimated. He stepped forward from behind a cluster of trees, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on her. In an instant, the villagers' attention shifted. Murmurs filled the air, half confusion, half disbelief. No one had imagined that the city woman and this quiet man were connected. They had assumed her wealth was earned in the bustling streets of Lagos, perhaps through hard work or luck. But the truth was far more unexpected. Something about the way he looked at her, a mix of respect, caution, and something deeper, hinted at a story untold, a secret that could shake the very foundation of the village. Her mother's eyes widened as she noticed the man, her heart tightening. She recognized something in his gaze, a protector, a partner, someone tied to her daughter's success in ways she couldn't yet explain. The villagers, on the other hand, had no idea. Their assumptions about wealth, power, and influence were about to be shattered. The tension was thick, almost tangible. Each silent moment stretched, the air buzzing with curiosity and suspicion. Questions hung over the compound like heavy clouds. Who was he? What role did he play in her return? And most importantly, what secret did they both carry that could change everything they thought they knew about this girl who left as a nobody and came back in a Benz? As she walked closer to him, the crowd leaned in, eager for answers. But she paused, letting the suspense settle, letting the weight of the moment press on every mind. Some truths, she knew, needed patience before they could be revealed. And the secret behind her return was just beginning to unfold. The villagers' murmurs grew louder, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the man before her. There was an unspoken understanding in his eyes, a bond forged through experiences no one else could guess. The Benz, the city life, the sudden return, it all connected to him in ways the village couldn't even imagine. Her mother shifted uneasily, sensing the weight of what was about to be revealed. She had always known that her daughter's journey wasn't ordinary, but seeing the man step forward, calm and composed, made her realize that the truth was bigger than she had imagined. The village had expected a simple story of wealth and success, but the reality was far more complex, and far more dangerous. The young woman took a slow step toward him. Every eye followed, every whisper hushed in anticipation. The man nodded slightly, as if giving permission for the story to begin. It was subtle, but it carried authority. A few of the elders exchanged worried glances. They had lived long enough to recognize when something was not as it seemed. She opened her mouth to speak, but paused. Words weren't ready yet. The secret behind her return, the force that had changed her life, required timing. She glanced around, seeing the mixture of awe, jealousy, and suspicion etched on the villagers' faces. Some remembered her struggles, some remembered their cruel laughter, and some simply didn't know what to think. The air thickened with tension. Even the breeze seemed to slow, carrying the whispers across the compound like soft warnings. Everyone felt it, the pull of a story unfolding, the feeling that the surface had barely been scratched. The man's presence alone hinted at connections, power, and decisions that had shaped her life in ways the village would struggle to understand. Her mother stepped closer, instinctively protective, yet proud. She felt the gravity of the moment, that the daughter she had watched grow up in hardship had returned not just with wealth, but with a secret strong enough to command attention and fear. And the villagers, who had assumed they knew everything about her, were about to see that her story was only beginning. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the dusty street, the stage was set. Secrets hung in the air like tension strings, ready to snap. The village had no idea what was coming, and by the time they learned the truth, it might already be too late. The sun had almost vanished behind the distant trees, leaving the village bathed in golden-orange light. Every villager seemed frozen, holding their breath as the woman and the man stood together in the compound. The air vibrated with tension, curiosity, and something heavier, anticipation of the unknown. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but carrying weight. "You all thought I left with nothing, that my life ended outside this village. But the truth is far from what you imagined." Her words rippled through the crowd, leaving them confused, guessing, and waiting for the revelation. The man stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers, a silent signal passing between them. Then, for the first time, he spoke, calm, precise, and unmistakably commanding. "Some things in life are earned, not just with sweat or luck. Some things are protected." The villagers exchanged worried glances. Nobody understood yet, but they sensed it. The story they thought they knew was only the surface. A few brave youths tried to approach, eager for answers, but she raised a hand, stopping them. Her gaze swept over the compound, scanning familiar faces, neighbors who had mocked her, friends who had doubted her, even the boy who once ignored her. Every pair of eyes now followed her, waiting for the secret to unfold. She let the silence stretch, savoring the suspense. Then, a subtle gesture, the man handed her a small envelope, sealed and heavy. It wasn't money. It wasn't a city business card. It was something far more significant, far more shocking to anyone who knew even a little about the life she had left behind. Her mother stepped closer, instinctively protective, sensing the magnitude of the moment. She knew that whatever was inside that envelope could change the village's perception forever. Some elders murmured, some children gasped quietly, and some adults began exchanging frantic whispers, trying to guess what kind of secret could connect a quiet man, a luxury car, and the girl they once knew. She smiled faintly, holding the envelope close. The secret was hers to reveal, but not yet. The village would soon learn that her wealth, her confidence, and her sudden return were only part of the story. Beneath it all was something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about her, and about themselves. As dusk settled, the crowd couldn't look away. The stage was set, the suspense high, and the first thread of the truth had begun to unravel. The village had no idea how deep this secret would go, or how it would change everything in its path. Night had settled softly over the village, but the compound remained alive with whispered speculation. Lamps flickered in windows, casting trembling shadows across the dusty streets. The villagers could not look away the Benz, the stylish woman, the quiet man, and now the mysterious envelope had captured every ounce of attention. She finally opened the envelope, just enough to let a corner peek out. The crowd leaned closer, as if the faint glimpse could tell the story. Inside was a single document, official-looking, marked with seals and signatures. Her hands held it with care, her expression unreadable. The villagers tried to guess. Was it money? Was it proof of ownership? Or something far stranger? The men stepped forward, voice low but firm. "This is why she is here, why she returned. Not for revenge, not for pride, but to set things right." The words hung in the night air, heavier than any murmur or whisper. Eyes widened, breaths caught. No one expected the explanation to carry this weight. Her mother reached out, hesitating, but proud. She had raised a daughter who never allowed circumstances to define her. Now, standing in the fading glow of dusk, she could see the layers of her daughter's strength. The villagers, meanwhile, had begun to grasp that this was not just about wealth or a city life. It was about power, influence, and a truth that would change everything they assumed about the world beyond their compound. The young woman's gaze swept the crowd, sharp and commanding. "Everything you think you know about me, about who I am, where I come from, is incomplete." Her voice grew firmer, resonating in the quiet streets. "Some choices are made in shadows. Some battles fought silently. And some fortunes are earned through courage you cannot yet imagine." Even the children sensed the seriousness, the quiet authority in her words. The village elders shifted, whispering among themselves, their pride and curiosity mingling with unease. Everyone understood one thing clearly now: her return was not random, her wealth was not simple, and the man beside her was far more than an ordinary figure in the village. As the night deepened, the suspense grew unbearable. The stage was set for revelations, and the villagers knew whether they admitted it or not that the secret she carried would reshape the village, challenge old assumptions, and leave an unforgettable mark on everyone who had once doubted her. The night air was thick with tension. The villagers pressed closer, their curiosity now mixed with fear. Every flickering lamp, every shadow seemed to exaggerate the moment. No one had ever seen her like this, confident, mysterious, untouchable. And beside her, the quiet man stood firm, his presence commanding, as if he alone could protect the secret now hanging in the air. A few elders whispered urgently among themselves. "Could it be?" one muttered, but the words trailed off. Nobody dared speak louder, fearing they might provoke the woman or the man beside her. Children peeked from behind walls and gates, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Even those who had once mocked her felt a prickling unease. Something was shifting in the village tonight, something beyond their understanding. Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she glanced at her daughter. Pride warred with worry in her eyes. She had always known her daughter carried strength, but the magnitude of it now was almost frightening. The woman raised her head, scanning the crowd, letting their reactions settle in. She had returned not just to show her success, but to reveal carefully, intentionally a truth that would shake the village to its core. The man's voice cut through the night, calm but authoritative. "Some secrets protect, some empower, and some reveal the choices we cannot ignore." His eyes briefly met hers, and the subtle nod passed between them, a signal that the first step of the revelation was about to unfold. She moved slowly toward the villagers, the envelope still in her hands. "Many of you judged me," she began, voice steady, resonant. "Some of you laughed. Some of you ignored. But tonight, you will see that the life I built, the return I made, is tied to truths you cannot yet comprehend." Gasps echoed through the crowd. A few villagers whispered guesses, voices trembling with excitement and fear. Who was this man beside her? What had happened in the city to transform the girl they had once overlooked? And what secret could possibly justify the Benz, the confidence, and the aura of power that surrounded them? The woman paused, letting the suspense stretch. Every heartbeat in the village seemed louder than the last. And as she prepared to take the next step, the first real hint of the secret began to show, something that would make everyone rethink what they believed about her, the man, and the paths that led them here. The crowd held its breath. The woman unfolded the envelope slowly, letting everyone see the official document inside. A hush fell over the compound. Even the usual gossipers found themselves silent, unable to tear their eyes away. The paper gleamed faintly under the flickering lamps, its seals and signatures carrying authority no one could question. "This," she began, her voice steady and clear, "is proof that some things are bigger than this village, bigger than what you think defines a person." Her eyes swept over familiar faces, neighbors who had mocked, friends who had doubted, and elders who had assumed they knew everything about life and success. "I did not earn this wealth by chance. I did not return by luck. I returned because of choices made in silence, sacrifices unseen, and protection given when I needed it most. The man stepped closer, nodding subtly. She was never alone, he added, voice calm but commanding. While the world thought she struggled, some of us ensured her steps were guided, her path protected. That is why she can stand here today. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eyes widened. Murmurs ran like wildfire. Some whispered in disbelief, some in fear. The village had expected a simple story, a girl who went to the city, got rich, and returned. But this was far from simple. Her mother clutched her chest, pride battling worry. She understood more than anyone. The man beside her daughter had been a silent force, a protector, someone whose presence explained the mystery of her sudden success. And now, the villagers were beginning to see that her return was not just about a Benz, a city life, or flashy appearances. It was about power, influence, and secrets that had quietly shaped her destiny. A few brave youths stepped forward, curiosity overcoming fear. What do you mean by protection? One asked, voice trembling. She smiled faintly, letting the suspense linger just a moment longer. Some truths, she knew, needed timing. And the deeper part of the secret, the one that would shock everyone, was still hidden, waiting for the right moment. As the night deepened, the village seemed suspended in time. Every glance, every whispered word, every wide-eyed stare reinforced one truth: this return was no ordinary homecoming. The young woman and the quiet man had shifted the balance of perception. And the secret that had brought them here was only beginning to be understood. The document had done its work. Gasps filled the village compound, some soft, some sharp, as whispers escalated into outright murmurs of disbelief. Eyes darted between the young woman and the quiet men, struggling to piece together what they had just witnessed. This was not the return of a girl who had left empty-handed. This was something far more significant. The woman's gaze swept over the crowd, calm and steady. "You all assumed you knew my story," she said, voice carrying across the compound. "But there are parts of life that only a few ever see. People think success comes from luck, charm, or connections. But sometimes, it comes from choices made in silence, sacrifices that go unnoticed, and alliances that remain hidden until the right moment." A few villagers whispered frantically to each other, trying to guess the nature of the secret. Others remained frozen, faces pale, as understanding slowly began to creep in. The quiet man, standing slightly behind her, gave no explanation, yet his presence spoke volumes. Protective. Powerful. Untouchable. Her mother's hand shook slightly as she looked at her daughter. Pride mixed with fear. She knew more than anyone the struggles her daughter had faced. And now she realized that the forces shaping her life had been far more complex than she had imagined. The villagers had underestimated both her courage and the depth of the alliances that had safeguarded her. One of the elders, voice trembling, finally spoke. You mean to say, she wasn't alone all this time?" His words barely carried over the murmurs. She nodded slowly, letting the weight of her silence answer more than her words ever could. Some villagers began whispering about the implications. Who was this man? What had he done? How could one girl, once ordinary and overlooked, return with not just wealth, but influence and protection that no one had anticipated? She held the envelope tightly, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the growing chaos. "There are truths that only reveal themselves when the time is right," she said softly, but everyone heard. "And now, the time is here." The crowd shifted nervously, sensing the moment approaching when the secret would fully unfold. The quiet man's eyes scanned the compound, alert, ready. The villagers could feel the weight of what was coming, the revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about her, the city, and even their own assumptions about the world. The envelope was opened fully now, and the village could finally see the truth. The document revealed her connection to someone powerful, someone who had quietly guided her path all along. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and whispers turned into stunned silence. The quiet man beside her was no ordinary figure. He had been the unseen force protecting her, ensuring that every challenge, every setback, was only temporary. "This is why I returned," she said, voice steady, yet carrying the weight of the revelation. "Not just for wealth, not just to prove myself, but to show that what you assume about people, about their lives, is often incomplete. Some truths are hidden, and some paths are guarded by forces you cannot see." The villagers exchanged frantic glances. Some covered their mouths, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others shook their heads, trying to comprehend how a girl they had dismissed, laughed at, and ignored could come back with so much power and influence. Her mother stepped forward, tears glimmering in her eyes. Pride and relief collided in her chest. She had watched her daughter struggle, had feared for her, had doubted the world's fairness, and now she understood. Her daughter had returned not just changed, but protected, guided, and unstoppable. The man spoke softly, yet every word carried weight. "What you see is only part of the story. She faced struggles you cannot imagine. And yet, through it all, she persevered. That is why she stands here today, not just in a Benz, but with the strength to face anyone who doubted her." A few villagers stumbled backward, overwhelmed. The whispers of envy, disbelief, and awe collided, filling the compound with chaos. For some, pride had been replaced with shame. For others, curiosity burned fiercer than ever. Everyone understood one thing clearly: this was a return unlike any they had seen, and the girl they had mocked was now a force they could not ignore. She looked around the crowd, calm and confident, yet there was a subtle softness in her eyes for those who had once cared for her. "Let this be a lesson," she said, voice firm. "Judgments are easy when you do not know the full story. But strength, courage, and perseverance, those are seen only when the time is right." The compound was alive with reaction, tension, and awe. The secret had been revealed, and the village would never be the same. The woman who returned in a Benz had changed not only her life but the perception of everyone around her, leaving a story that would be remembered for years.